own homegrown writers. African fiction is clearly the new trend. Substitute African for African American, and I have a sense of déjà vu. Yet to the media and industry, a black writer is a black writer, right? I realise I've focused on fiction, but to be honest, if we look at non-fiction, there's very little happening. If we look at poetry, almost done. If we look at poetry, then a 2006 Arts Council report I initiated into the situation for poets of colour in British publishing, called Free Verse, revealed that under 1% of poetry books are by poets of colour. I subsequently initiated a mentoring scheme with 20 poets with Spread the Word Writing Agency, which is already yielding great results in terms of many of the poets beginning to have their poetry collections published. If we cast our minds back to the 1980s, then several poets with Caribbean heritage were published in Britain, some of whom have gone on to become established, even national figures. The women among them were Grace Nichols, Jean Binta Breeze and Valerie Bloom. But their first publishers were small, independent presses, and their reputations were built through the lively performances of their poetry on the live literature circuit, not brokered by the mainstream establishment. Between this generation and recently, the statistic of under 1% speaks for itself and includes Dorothea Smart, Patience Agbabi, Sherry Mack, Jackie Kay and myself. I've been involved in a new major diversity research project by Spread the Word Literature Organisation again, which is currently underway, and which is conducting new research into the situation for writers of colour and publishing in Britain. I personally have a sense of how things stand, but the facts will speak for themselves. It's published next year. Theatre of Black Women lost its funding in the late 1980s, as many such arts companies did, but for a couple of decades afterwards, I always thought it had served its purpose in the creation of theatre by and about black women at the time, when we were either absent or stereotyped in British theatre. Certainly by the 1990s, British cultural life felt a lot more integrated, in no small part due to the arts activism and of preceding generations, the troublemakers and rabble-rousers who kicked up a fuss at society's inequalities. I could barely see a theatre play without resorting to heckling and then making a quick exit. What I didn't then realise was that gains made can also be lost, and that if we, the outsiders, stop lobbying the institutions and gatekeepers, they revert to business as usual, a status quo, a ruling elite that continues to perpetuate its own interests and decide on ours. But the future is not bleak. It can never be bleak. Taking responsibility for our own creativity, as many of us did in the 80s, is a start. Don't moan or blame, but be your own agent for change. Setting up publishing initiatives puts us at the helm. Then doing everything we can to make sure these publishing houses reach a wide readership is also up to us. The publishing approach needs to be twofold. On the one hand, we need to continue to set up individual initiatives such as Jacaranda Press, but on the other hand, we need to keep banging on the doors of the gatekeepers and making them aware that we exist. They have the money, marketing power, networks, and decades worth of expertise to make a success of our books. Taking responsibility for the quality of the writing we produce is also an issue. The work has to be good enough, although that, of course, is not always quantifiable. Once published, authors need to do the hustle, as I have done all my professional writing life. Writing a book and then expecting the world to land at your feet is a nice fantasy, but that's all it is. Even when some writers get lucky, and they do, often with their first book, sustaining a long published career takes a formidable amount of energy, focus, resourcefulness, and tenacity. Learning the hard way, as I have done, builds resilience and determination. Expect to do the day job, but make sure it's one that allows you enough time to write. Do readings, any that come your way, but also seek them out. Don't wait to be asked. Eventually you'll be paid well for them, although not always, but weigh up the benefits of each invitation. Will I reach a wider audience if I accept? Review for the newspapers. We need more black critics. If it's not a skill you have, then learn it. Once you review for the literary editors, they will get your books reviewed in their papers. Get to know the people you need to know. The world won't change because you disapprove of the adage that it's not what you know, but who you know. So network like crazy and make sure your book is ready or almost ready when you do. Don't follow, lead. Find the stories that haven't been told and be aware that it has to interest a wide enough readership. I'm currently working on a new novel, and at the